welcome. I'm standing here in Mountain View Center in Silicon Valley, together with one of the organizers of this really interesting conference called Podcar City 9. You're also one of the founder of the first Podcar City, which originated in Sweden, I think.
That's right. It was in Uppsala in 2007, Podcar City 1, indeed.
Yeah. You have a long background in both in the solar city. You have a solar city background into solar technology and also in sustainable transportation. Perhaps you can just tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, well, I started working in solar energy in the 1970s, and it was around 1980 that I realized that something in motion would give people a much clearer picture of what the potential of solar was. So I built a solar vehicle that was based on a tricycle, an adult tricycle, and what that involved was just a little bit of welding, and then I put a solar panel on top. Later I put a second solar panel on top of a little framework that I set up over the three-wheeled bicycle. I set the seat down lower so it would be more stable. And then in the 1990s I built a solar race car with a group of students down in Mexico. And then from there I started to do some more experimenting, and finally in 2006 I came up with the idea, which is perfectly obvious and was right in front of my nose all the time, that a Podcar system, which I already had understood from the 1990s, could be done with solar all along, continuously along the track. And when I had that realization, I started doing some calculations, and voila, it was perfectly fine. You know, there was plenty of sunshine available to do this with maybe only a 1 or 2 meter wide solar array, which could be right congruent with the width of the beam, the guideway. So it seemed very feasible at that point.
So if you compare the PRT system, the personal rapid transportation technology, and you think about other automation, there's a lot of discussion now about automation in general, and special in terms of for cars and so on.
Yeah.
How do you see, can they work together, you think, PRT system and autonomous systems for cars, or what do you see the pros and cons in this discussion about
Well, there's one thing to bear in mind, and that's Mother Nature and the laws of physics. And one of the laws of physics is the conservation of momentum. Mass times velocity of two objects meeting each other is the same as they hit. And so when you have that match, then what happens is that either the object that gets hit, which weighs less, is bounced back, or the two as equals will bounce back. But now we never have that ideal condition like on a billiard ball table. You have a situation where if an automated car fully equipped with the latest and greatest technology and a dog runs in front of it or a person walks in front of it, there's no way for the physics to react in time. There's nothing physically possible to keep from harm. So what I'm very keen about is the fact that with the new developments in automation that are, you know, they're universal principles after all, and with the prospect of putting vehicles out of the street where humans are in their natural setting, you might say. We don't have wings, you know, we don't dig under the ground as such, you know, naturally. We're naturally walking around on the ground with gravity helping, you know, we stand and we walk. These are normal human capabilities, and as such, what we need is to preserve that space for ourselves. And the streets are the commons. In other words, this is what belongs to everybody. And I think that automation and elevation have to go together. In fact, I coined a term, sane transport, and that stands for solar, automated, non-stop, in other words, never have to stop from origin to destination on demand, and fourthly, elevated. So you have sane transportation that involves great separation between people and things moving at high speed. And if you don't follow that rule, as, for example, you see in downtown San Jose, right nearby here. There you have the train going by at a maximum of 10 miles an hour. That's not transportation in the right sense. And why does it go so slow? It has to, because somebody might walk in front of it not being careful enough, and since it's so massive, it takes it a long time to slow down. So you have to go very slowly, anticipating that somebody would jump in the way, and it needs a very attentive driver. And that is a condition that cannot be fixed by automation. No. It's just physics.
Yeah, and I think what I've learned from this conference, at least, is that if I wasn't convinced before, I am totally now, in terms of the technology is already here for the PRT to just implement. Yeah. But the biggest problem is political partly and also economically, just to get started, to get these prototypes or to get this full-scale demonstration project out there. So just, to draw attention, as you've talked a lot about during this conference. But what do you see? Is it is it the political and economical, the biggest challenges, or is it awareness?
I think it's still technology. It really is. And I'm beginning to see an indication that there are people working very diligently on getting the technology such that these systems will be extremely more efficient than what's been built even now as labeled PRT or ATN. And that means that the weight of the car is very much a matter of design. Get the weight down. If you're 1,500 pounds, that's still way too heavy. If we can get the weight of the vehicle down to 500 pounds, or say 200, 250 kilos, or we can also get the guideway weight way down, then visually it's much more attractive. It's much easier to construct in the end, and it's just like the iPad as I see it. The iPad is elegant because it's very lightweight. It performs all the functions that a mainframe computer weighing a ton would have had 20, 30 years ago. But people in the Apple company, they just worked over and over and over again to trim down the excess and find ways with Intel and other companies like that that are designing chips that are ever more energy efficient, more processing per watt hour, kilowatt hour, energy focus, all of those things, materials focus, energy focus, and streamlining. Then when you go to a politician and you have a system that's so much better, when you go to a business investor and your system is so much better than anything else out there, it's not going to be an issue of economics. Economics is going to score because you're actually looking carefully at how to make it less costly, because you're using less materials, using less energy, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And then I would just ask you, maybe if you will look ahead, like 5 years from now, as I've understood right now, these systems are more attracted towards airports or hospitals and so on. But if you would look at a big metropolitan area where you have an integrated system, do you see this happening, for example, somewhere in US, or do you think China will be the first, or what do you think, looking 5 years ahead?
I think you're going to be very surprised. I think that the countries that are going to implement this first are the countries where they do not have a surplus of oil. Where here in the United States we actually have a deficit, but we overcome this deficit with a military presence around the world, and that is that's a road to nowhere. That's no solution. It's only a temporary, right? It's just a temporary fix, and we are going to pay dearly down the road for this violent way of maintaining our lifestyle. What we need is to look to countries where they already are impoverished energetically by virtue of the fact that they have to import their energy from someplace else. If you find a country that has a stable government and a need for energy, when we tell them that this is solar powered, it's going to blow everybody's mind. They're just going to be ready to go very quickly. And I see that's where the quick hockey stick, we call it here in Silicon Valley, where you see the hockey stick development.
Just one question for Sweden, because we have a Swedish audience also. And in Sweden right now, this project, there was a project in 2007. It started there, and there were Koreans copying it and built it in outside Seoul somewhere, I think.
Yeah.
But it hasn't moved forward in Sweden. But I would ask you, maybe if you can elaborate, could it be possible, for example, to get companies involved in Sweden? If you, for example, is it possible to use these PRT systems to transport goods as well? Could that be a way to attract companies, I think?
It's a very practical for mining, and there are many places where you couldn't put a mine and put roads today, where you could in turn put posts in the ground and do a podcar system, because, for example, animals can go underneath it, right?
Yeah.
And you can not worry too much about whether it's pretty or not, and you can get over the basic practice. I said earlier today that I think that testing is the key thing, and if you have an industrial application and you get thousands of hours on a system because it's running 24 hours a day in an industrial application or a remote application for mining and stuff like that, it's going to really help work out the bugs, as it were, and get it working right.
Yeah. And John, one final question: if in countries like Sweden, we have solar energy enough for maybe maybe 9 months a year or something like that. The other months we have to combine with wind and so on. So how do you see this system work? Can you store the energy when you have excess capacity of energy, or when you have deficient energy, so you can store it in a battery, for example? How do you see that work in countries like Sweden?
I suggest that we do like what my great-grandparents did and my grandfather and grandmother growing up in Sweden, and that is in the wintertime, and when it's dark outside, stay home.
Yeah. This is Ron Swenson, so I should say his last name, it explains why he has a grandfather from Sweden. That's the reason.
And so I say, remember that the modern technology that we have is, as much as anything, a privilege, not necessarily a God-given right. Survival is not mandatory. If we don't change our ways of using fossil fuels, Mother Nature will do some correcting, and we won't be a party to the future of this planet. So if we want to have a future, we have to be conscious of the seasons, and if in the wintertime it's too cold to go outside, we should not take that risk. And right now, when you go out in the ice and snow driving an automobile, you're taking risks anyway, and there are many more accidents under those conditions. Well, let's get a clue, and we have these automated systems. Be a little bit careful about how much we use them in circumstances of storming and so forth. Let's everybody stay home and hunker down, we say in English, to take it easy when there's inclement weather. And on the other hand, if there are emergency services required, I'm confident that we can use this just fine. And with a surplus of energy from the sun you get in the summertime, you can leave the other storage methods like stored hydro to wait until they're more needed in the wintertime. So we can do a balance. We can provide surplus in the summertime and take the deficiency from the other storage systems in the wintertime.
Just a quick follow-up. Could you have even this system on an off-grid system if you would have solar and wind combined, for example, in a smaller community, if they didn't want, for some reason?
And stored hydro, stored hydro, wind, and there are also some other storage technologies that are coming along very nicely that I think will give us a different opportunity than we've had in the past. But I see much potential in stored energy.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Johan.
Thank you.
Thank you.